Hi, and welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me on the show today is Peter Martin. He's the Water Resources Program Manager for the Calaveras County Water District. Peter, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Joel.
Well, it's really good to have you on the show for the first time, and you've been back up in this area for a little more than a year, working for CCWD. And so thanks for taking the time to join us to talk a little bit about water in Calaveras County. So before we get into your job and what you've been doing over the last year and what you plan to do, I was hoping to give our viewers just a little bit of background about who you are as a person and what brought you here. So let's go all the way back to where you grew up.
So I grew up in the Valley in Stockton, Manteca. That's kind of, where I grew up. I'd spent most of my younger days there. I ended up going to Sacramento City College. Didn't go to college right away, but then I transferred to CSU Monterey Bay and got a degree in environmental science there. I ended up doing some water quality research there on the coast. It was something that I really liked, and that kind of maybe was the point where I decided that I wanted to get into a career in water. And I actually spent several years working for the State Water Resources Control Board when I got out of college in Sacramento, working in the Division of Water Quality. Really good experience. Then I ended up for several years working for the City of San Diego's Public Utilities Department, working in long-range planning, and here I am now in Calaveras County.
So you said that the first time you kind of knew you were going to do water was in college. Going back even further, let's say in high school, did you have any other aspirations?
I was kind of listless, I guess, at some point in my life. I had some kind of interesting professors in the community college setting, and kind of got me interested in science. It was a really good kind of opportunity to kind of explore things, because I didn't really exactly know what I wanted to do right off the bat, and then just kind of fell into my lap. I kind of graduated just before the recession, and that job came available, and here I am today, 10 plus years later, still working in the same area. So
you said that doing research down along the coast was kind of inspiring to you, like you got really interested. What was it about that research that really grabbed you?
When I started college, I really thought I was going to work outdoors all the time, and that's really what my goal was. And crawling in and out of creeks, taking water quality samples. We had some great fun research projects and wetland restoration projects, kind of wetland research, looking at them as maybe a natural cleaning up of the waterway and things like that. And I just fell in love with that type of science, and so yeah, I think so, definitely.
Cool. Coming from growing up in the Valley and then later in life going down to San Diego, very different lifestyle down there, and then back up to the foothills, a little bit east of where you grew up. What was that transition like, going from a beach town back up to the foothills?
Well, I definitely, I loved my experience in San Diego. It was great. I worked with a really talented group of folks, and I got to work on some really fun projects, mainly with recycled water. And, I think there's a lot of growth there. Kind of gave me ideas of, the kind of things I like to do, and that a lot of opportunities to experience different projects and work on a lot of things. It was great, hanging out on the beach every day. My kids, were small, and they lived on the beach practically. It was just like our playground. But then, this opportunity came up, and I just couldn't pass it up. It just sounded so great. And we came back. We're closer to family again, and it's been wonderful so far.
Tell me some of the things about the foothill region that you really love.
I think I've told you this story before. When I was driving up for my job interview here, everything was around February, March, and I'd come from down in Southern California, and everything was so green. It was just so lush and beautiful. Driving up to San Andreas, and I just think, man, it seemed like something I hadn't seen in ages, and partially because the drought had been going on so long. But I was just definitely captivated by the beauty of the foothills at that point. It maybe something that I didn't recognize when I was younger, but as an adult, I had a much better appreciation for that.
So all job interviews should take place in the spring. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, before everything turns brown. Yeah.
We conned you into it. All right. What about family? You said you have a couple kids and a wife. Is it good for family up in this area?
Yeah, it's been wonderful. My daughter started kindergarten as soon as we got here. It was a great transition. We love the school she's in and small class sizes. There's certain aspects of, living in a rural community that can be challenging, but coming from a city, obviously a large city, I was living in a city of more than 1 million people and come to, much smaller community. But at the same time, there's some charm to it. And, I love getting out with the kids and getting outdoors and exploring. So.
Yeah. And finding a place to eat after 5 can be tough sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. The sidewalks roll up, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been here a little more than a year now. Was it what you expected so far?
Yeah, I think, I guess I'd kind of forgotten, living in the city life, just the pace and kind of how much people are willing to slow down and talk to you, it was kind of interesting at first. I remember going into the grocery store and being in line and thinking, why is this grocery clerk talking to the person to them for minutes? Let's move along, let's go. But the reality was there was no one in line behind me, so it didn't really matter. But it's just I find that to be kind of nice, just to be able to slow down and talk to people, and people would seem genuinely interested in what you've got going on and willing to talk. So
getting on the job, you had all this experience in the field. Was that experience that you were able to just apply right away, or was it a lot different at CCWD?
Well, I thought I'd be able to, parlay a lot of that experience I had, and once I got here, I realized I just had to throw that all out the window, and, totally different set of circumstances. What I did bring with me is a lot of, skilled writing, which, is valuable for grant writing aspects. I've got some good public speaking skills, things like that just kind of, you become more well-rounded throughout your career. Those are transition no matter what, but really diving into the detail of the water district was just really challenging. There's so much to learn. I was lucky in that I had a kind of a short transition period with Larry Diamond, who was kind of our assistant general manager for 20 years or so, and so I had some overlap with him, and just having that opportunity to spend time with him and get that, transition and brain dump was really huge for me, and definitely helped. So
absolutely. So it's not just about transitions like that you have to make work, but this is a changing landscape right now. It seems like with the water world, with the drought and with what the state's asking people to do, and with water rights. And so I want to go into some of those big challenges a little bit later in the interview, but not everyone really even knows what a water district is, what CCWD is, and what we have in the county, what assets and all of that. So can you go into a little bit about CCWD that people might not know?
Yeah, well, I think CCWD is what's called the special district. It's sort of it's a governmental agency, but it's sort of separate from any county or city. Obviously we were created in the 40s to develop water resources projects, hydropower projects, wastewater services within Calaveras County. And as a result, we've continued to operate under those circumstances. The district has about 13,000 water connections right now, probably about 5,000 wastewater connections, 2 hydropower projects. I think we have 6 different water diversions, and basically 6 different water treatment facilities. I think we have, last check, 13 wastewater facilities. And also, we definitely just have about 65 staff full-time that are out there. The majority of those folks are on the ground, in the field, making all this work. We don't see them day to day, but they're out and they're making sure that everything continues to run flawlessly. So
that's got to be a little unusual to have one district with all these areas that aren't even really connected. That's got to be tough.
Yeah, that was something that was a complete difference from Southern California. It's very highly engineered. Everything has some sort of intertie So there's backup supplies, there's backups to the backups. It's very different up here in that everything is sort of isolated. That's part of just being in a rural community. We have very few customers per mile of pipeline in the wastewater and water side. It's sort of a set of really big, complex challenges to operate water and wastewater in the district. In general, I think people are surprised at how expensive wastewater is, but it's just definitely due to the fact that we don't have a lot of customers on miles of pipeline. In the rural setting, it becomes really expensive to treat wastewater and follow through and meet all our regulatory requirements and everything like that. So.
No, absolutely. So looking at water resources, which is really the department that you head up, I mean, you're the main guy working on this stuff, with a lot of help from other staff members. It's a team for sure. What are some of the main things that a person like you works on in the water district?
Well, I wear a lot of hats, a lot of meetings. I kind of have my hand in a lot of things. I think we all do at the district. That's just part of being in a team of folks that's not very big. But yeah, definitely, typically my duties range from anything to water rights, a lot of long-range planning, kind of technical resources, and then also grants, as well as just sort of general day-to-day pick up the slack on all kinds of variety of policy and other things like that. So it's really kind of a unique job. But I enjoy the challenge of that, and it's something new every day. And so it's been great.
And CCWD is kind of run by a board that's elected by the people, and so is a big part of your job interacting with the board and bringing agenda items before them for approval or disapproval.
Yeah, obviously that we have a board that's very involved in sort of the day-to-day policy and governance aspects of things, but they're not living it every day like we are. So sometimes at staff level we're just sort of doing a lot of education, providing them with an evaluation of alternatives for projects and various studies and other things like that. And just the day-to-day operations of all the facilities that we have. We're sort of the technical group that's providing recommendations to that board, allowing them to make those choices, because ultimately the governance of the district, resides with those elected officials.
You mentioned a minute ago that one of the things you work on is water rights, and I think that's a really fascinating topic, and I think it's a topic that not everyone understands fully. So can you help explain a little bit about water rights for those who just don't know?
Yeah, water rights is just so convoluted and complex. I'm definitely not an expert by any means, and that was something that I didn't deal with in my previous job. Actually, at the city of San Diego, we basically imported all the water from the Colorado River and the Delta. So it was kind of just you get what you get, and that's it. But CCWD has a real complex suite of water rights, and that was something that just took a lot of learning on my part. But just to give you sort of a general overview of California water rights, water rights in the West are very different than sort of the East Coast or anything. It sort of operates under a system that's typically called an appropriative system. There's sort of kind of typically two type of water rights that are discussed a lot. Those are the riparian rights, which means they live along the riparian corridor. You have a piece of property that is adjacent to a water river, lake, whatever. You can have access to that, but there's sort of limitations on that. You can't store water and things like that. But what typically we talk a lot about in water rights is the appropriative system. CCWD has a lot of what are called appropriative water rights that we use for day-to-day operations and serving our customers water. And typically the water rights system in California has kind of been based in an old law that came out of the gold rush era, where people were out building diversions and flumes and things like that, and just sort of staking their claim, and it created like sort of this hierarchical water rights system, whereby basically the first in time was the first in right. So that's kind of sort of where we are today. some of the water rights in Calaveras County are some of the oldest in the state. They go back to that gold rush era, including some of the ones that are used by many of the water districts in Calaveras County.
So it was kind of a lawless, crazy time back in the gold rush era. If you got there and you got your flume built, then you kind of had a right to use that water. As it progressed, it got a little more organized. And then I always hear the year 1914, and everyone likes to say pre-1914 and post-1914, but what the heck does that even mean?
So, so there was sort of this lawlessness, and you could maybe even argue that there still is a lot of lawlessness. People are lawsuits every single day associated with water rights. People have ideas about what the best use for water is. So that 1914 time was a time when the California legislature acted, and they created sort of a permitting system through the California Water Commission. And so any of the water rights that are prior to that 1914 time are treated differently. They sort of don't follow that hierarchical system that we talked about that was sort of, brought out of the 49er days, I suppose. So essentially, the pre-14 water right holders are sort of the most senior water right holders usually. They get their water first, and the junior water right holders sort of go based on where they made the claim in time. So typically, in a time of drought, they're the ones that first to get cut back. So a lot of times you've heard of what are called curtailments. Usually the junior water right holders are the first ones to get curtailed, and then they sort of work their way up, making sure that the most senior water right holders get their full allotment of water as well.
So when it comes to CCWD in Calaveras County, how do these water rights impact us?
Well, last year was definitely an interesting time. We did have some curtailments. We're lucky in that we did have, sort of a robust amount of water rights to continue serving our customers. We did have some conservation measures in place. Those were sort of mandated by the state. But, for instance, let's take the McCallum River. We have sort of more of a junior water right in the McCallum River. We were curtailed, and so we had to stop diverting out of our typical water supply. Luckily, we have a contract with Calaveras Public Utilities Department. They have a pre-14 right, and so we gain access to that right, and we were able to purchase water for the people of West Point, Wilseyville, and Bummerville. So
that's actually kind of a cool thing. So we have these rights. We can divert water out of a creek in the West Point area. Well, let's go over to the Stanislaus. So can you kind of explain how that system works, where we can store water, and then how we can use that water based on these rights?
Yeah. A lot of the water rights that CCWD developed on the Stanislaus are associated with the North Fork hydroelectric project. In the 90s, CCWD went through a massive effort to develop a hydroelectric project. That project is currently owned by CCWD. We are the license holder for that project by the federal regulations. However, Northern California Power Agency acts as sort of the steward and the operator of that project. And they operate under a complex suite of rights that allow them to generate hydroelectric power. But there's also some reservoirs associated with that project. The Spicer Reservoir, many people know it's a beautiful reservoir. That was built strictly kind of for the purpose of hydroelectric and water resources development for Calaveras County. So the water stored in that reservoir can be used to serve people all the way down throughout Calaveras County, actually all the way down to Copperopolis, where we have some people as well. So we utilize the benefit from the storage that was developed as part of that hydroelectric project to also serve consumptive needs.
So Spicer Reservoir, which many people know for recreation, actually was built by CCWD and its partners.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And then White Pines, too, that's also a CCWD reservoir?
Yeah, White Pines Reservoir, which also is owned by CCWD, is sort of operated for recreational purposes, but also it does serve a water supply for Sheep Ranch and other folks downstream. And obviously it was built at a time when a lot of water resources projects were going on in Calaveras County. I think you go back in history and you'll find that a lot of the water resources that we utilize are built decades ago.
Yeah, and they have multiple benefits. It's not just a water supply, but it could be a camping spot, it could be a boating spot, a place to go swimming, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of neat how I don't think people realize how ingrained the district is in their community.
Yeah, I mean, take White Pine as an example. That is just, I feel like a jewel. It's so pretty. I like to go and hang out there. I've been up there with my family, and we've had picnic and stuff like that. And I think it's just kind of one of those things. You build a water supply. Well, there is some access for other things as well. And I think that kind of going back to the water rights. I think a lot of folks think that water rights are to sort of trump all the other uses. Those need to be consumed and everything. But there needs to be some consideration for fish and people that want to go out and ride their rafts. We obviously know it's been very much talked about, the collapse of the Delta smelt fishery. There are fish in the Delta that need water. And so I think, there's this general notion that all the water of the state belongs to everybody. It's not just, water rights holders. There's something called the public trust that sort of the state board usually utilizes. And sort of their ruling as to what's a reasonable use or not. And the fact is that even though we have water rights, it's really just access to that water supply that belongs to everyone in the state.
So there's been this really nasty drought in the last 4 years. And the last year we had something close to normal in a lot of the state. The north got more, the south maybe didn't have a normal year. And so that was a reprieve from some really bad drought. But, before we got that good year, a lot of people were talking about, well, Australia completely redid their water rights system and, we should be more like them. And we saw the state come down and mandate water conservation across the state, which was unprecedented. The governor said you got to save 25%. Do you think that we're going to see some big shakeups in how water rights, that system works in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously what we saw in the past few years is that, water is a finite resource. We've seen some pretty good droughts throughout California, so this isn't the first time. But, I think as all that water becomes, claimed and people start to make use of it, there becomes more of a pulling and pushing for making sure that the water is available for those other things too as well. Obviously it's not good to have a river go dry. I mean, it's happened at times in California history, and it's kind of a travesty. So I think that we're going to have to get very inventive with how we utilize water throughout California. I'll take the example of San Diego, for instance. They're moving on now from relying on imported water. I think a lot of folks in Southern California at some point in the last few decades realized that maybe imported water supplies are not going to be there into 50 years, 100 years in the future. So they're looking at more inventive ways and very expensive ways too to create a local water supply. One of the projects that I worked on in San Diego was a indirect potable reuse project, which basically takes reclaimed wastewater and purifies it to the point where it can become drinking water, and it becomes back part of a water supply. And essentially, I think the goal was to eventually have up to 30 to 40% of that water supply be a local supply that's strictly recycled water. I think when you go from 90% of your water being imported from outside the region to getting more local control, it definitely is something that kind of allows you more flexibility to operate, and you're not having to go through these periods where everybody's in a panic to deal with the long-term drought.
But in Calaveras, we're in a slightly different situation where we actually are a source county. So this water is originating up the hill and coming down, and we take a piece of it. So can you share what our situation was even with this really terrible drought? Did we end up having enough water even at the worst of it?
Yeah, and I think I kind of mentioned that much of the water resources that are utilized in Calaveras County were developed decades ago. We haven't seen the same population booms that other places have. Therefore, many of those water resources that were developed with an eye on the future. And so a lot of the water resources that are utilized in Calaveras County are actually pretty robust at this point. And and we're lucky for that. But definitely we want to make sure that we continue to have those supplies available well into the future, and make sure that we can support a robust economy, and make sure that people have the appropriate opportunities to live here and also recreate here as well.
Does that come at a cost to protect those opportunities for the future?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, water rights is not just a matter of filling out the paperwork and going through it. There's obviously challenges from other folks that may want to see your water rights not go through. There's a lot of environmental review that's associated with applications for water rights. CCWD right now is actually undergoing some efforts on several of the water rights that we have throughout the county, and extending those water rights so that we can utilize those into the future and accommodate future anticipated growth. However, I think what isn't said is that those water rights are possibly one of the most valuable assets that the district has, and so it's worthwhile for the district to expend the money to protect those water rights. They're not physical projects. It's very odd, isn't it? You're sort of spending all this time and effort. Lots of technical resources go into making applications to the state for extensions of time for water rights, to put those water rights to use to continue to allow for that water to be available, 40 years from now, actually. So,
just about 3 minutes left. What's one really big challenge that you see coming in the next 10 years or so?
Well, I think, we kind of touched upon that water is a finite resource. A lot of people don't know that right now, CCWD and Calaveras County have users that are in what's called the Eastern San Joaquin Groundwater Basin. It's a critically overdrafted basin, and there was 2014 legislation enacted that basically said that they need to come up with a 20-year plan to develop sort of a sustainable groundwater basin. Basically, that basin has been overutilized, and so they need to bring it back into a point where those groundwater levels aren't dropping. What that does is brings us into a larger regional problem. We'll have to figure out regional solutions to those problems, including with our partners down the valley who are also utilizing that groundwater basin.
So if there's anything that you just wanted to leave our viewers with, what would you want to say?
Well, a couple things. I think, I find that this career is very rewarding. I'd encourage, children to continue to pursue education in engineering and science fields. I think that I'd like to see people locally that go out and maybe go to college and come back and fill jobs within Calaveras County District, Water District, for instance. And I just, I think it's sort of a thankless job working for a utility. Most people probably won't complain until they turn on the tap and there's no water there. And, as far as I know, we continue to be able to make sure that that water continues to run out of that tap. And, I hope that that can continue long into the future. And I think it's just a testament to the fact that we have so many facilities, which I spoke about earlier, and those facilities continue to run every day. And we have a lot of employees on the ground that are making that happen.
Peter, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Joel.
And thank you for joining me on Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope you join me next time.